And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. We're going to be talking about three of the same stories that we talked about yesterday. We've got that rain in the southeast. We're going to see if there's any flood threats, how many inches of rain we're going to be getting, and who's going to be getting the heaviest rain. And then we're also going to be talking about the northeast, where we got some light snow building in over the next 24 to 48 hours. But that I don't think is actually the big story in the Northeast. I think the big story up there is the wind, where we have some wind gusts of 35 to 45 miles per hour. So I think that's the big story for what's going on in the Northeast. Then in the West, we have two things going on. We'll be following this little cutoff low as there's the potential for Southern California to get some rain right there. But then in the extended forecast, which wasn't actually showing up in yesterday's model, we have this new system pushing into the northwest, but it almost looks like it's going to hang off the coast right here and then break off and do the exact same thing that first system was doing, having a little low move into possibly Southern California. So as of right now, it's not looking like it's going to be all too much rain, but California is in a drought, so that's certainly going to help. So we got the three stories. Rain down here in the southeast, a little bit of snow, but mostly the wind factor here in the northeast, and then a couple little systems that could be bringing some rain to Southern California. Certainly crossing my fingers there. As I always say, if you're only interested in one of these stories, you can go down in the comments below where I put the timestamps, and you'll be able to click directly to the region you're interested in. I also say it's good to check and make sure this is in fact my most recent forecast, because we know that forecast models change awfully fast. So just a good place to start is looking at the warnings map. And I think this sums up the forecast right here. Not a whole lot of extreme weather going on. I'd say the extreme weather is giving the United States a little bit of a break right now. We certainly got a lot of it 2 to 3 weeks ago with those ice storms and that Arctic blast of cold air that caused all the power outages and car pileups in Texas. Well, that is gone, and now you can see the warnings. We have almost nothing for the entire western half of the U.S., and then when we move to the eastern half of the U.S., we have some scattered flood threats. I'm hesitant to say they're not going to be all that bad, but when I'll show you the winter storm severity index in a second, and there's just limited impacts expected across the U.S. And then again, up there in the northeast, that is the high wind warning, and especially up there in Maine, where we're going to have some gusts possibly getting up to 60 miles an hour. So that actually might be the top story for today right there. But this pretty much explains what I was just saying about how the extreme weather is giving us a break. What that gray color means right there is limited impacts. It means it's barely going to affect your life whatsoever. You see, we have one little point in the northeast that has minor impacts. That's probably due to the mix of snow and wind right there. But overall, I'd say this is a great weather forecast. We don't have all that much extreme weather going on, which is always great to say. Now, with that being said, there's certainly still some stories that we have to talk about. First, that rain going through the south, then that wind through the northeast, and then that little cutoff low in the west. So we'll just piece through one by one right here. Keep your eye on that one first. That one right above Texas, that's what we'll follow right here. That's that cutoff low pressure system that'll be moving through the southeast throughout the next couple of days, bringing heavy rain especially to Georgia and South Carolina. A couple inches there, as you saw in the warnings map. There are some scattered places where there is a slight risk of flooding in place. And then if we go back, we can keep our eye on the northeast. That's actually a pretty significant trough up there, but the bulk of that is already moved off into the Atlantic, or it's up in Canada. So we're not getting all that much extreme snowfall or a major snowstorm by any measures for the northeast with this low, but you'll notice how close those isobars are together. That means lines of constant pressure, and it's typically a rule of thumb that the closer those lines are, the stronger your winds are going to be, because it's a gradient and the winds are flowing down that gradient. So as we click through there, you can see most of that, as of this morning, working into this afternoon, has moved off into the Atlantic, but behind it, those tight isobars are still in place So that's what's driving those extreme winds in the northeast and especially Maine, where we could have some gusts up to 60 miles per hour. And then on the left side of the screen, if I back it up, you can see where this comes from. It was actually part of this little trough up here that almost dodged Washington and just broke off, moved straight down south. You can see that low moving farther and farther south, and then the cutoff low is going to move into Southern California sometime tomorrow. The exact timing of it and how much rain we could be getting with that, we'll just have to dive in and see. But right now, considering that's not that far out in the forecast, I think there's a pretty good chance that Southern California and especially San Diego gets at least a little bit of rain. It's not looking like anything extreme, but California's in a drought and we'll take whatever we can get. And then here's what's actually different from yesterday's forecast, along with all the timing and exact locations of what we're talking about. Here's something that we weren't talking about at all yesterday, and this new trough that's going to be building in to the northwest. It looks like it's going to push in, and then something interesting happens right when it gets along the coast. So there is going to be some coastal rain that we'll talk about up here in Washington and Oregon, but the trough doesn't move into the northwest. What happens instead is similar to what happened with that first little cutoff low we were looking at. It breaks off. The majority of that trough dodges Washington and Oregon, but then this little cutoff low works its way into Central California. Now that one is all the way into Saturday and Sunday, so we're not going to spend too much time on that because I guarantee that forecast right there will change. But it's interesting and encouraging to see that we might have two different storms moving through Central and Southern California within the next few days, possibly bringing an inch at most to the very southern locations where that first storm's coming in. Most likely it's going to be less than a half an inch of rain, but like I said, that's certainly something that I'm crossing my fingers hoping will happen. So if we want to see all that another way, we'll do it in the exact same order. There's that little low pressure system organizing itself. Think of that just pulling in a bunch of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, just getting stronger and stronger. First, it'll bring some heavy rain to Louisiana and Mississippi. Then it's going to spread out across the region as it starts to move east. Now, right there, that's where the storm looks like it's officially turned into its own little low pressure system. It's strengthened. That's where we're getting some heavy rain in Georgia and South Carolina. And then, like I was saying yesterday, it will be interesting to see what happens to this low after it moves off the coast. So we're going to be getting a couple of inches of rain down here in the southeast. But then the question is that low going to move straight off into the Atlantic, or will it decide to move up the coast and then bring some rain to West Virginia, then possibly some snow to the northeast? That's just something we'll have to wait and see. As of right now, that low is going straight off into the Atlantic. No snow for the northeast with that one. Now, where we do have some snow for the northeast is with that low that's currently moving through. It's nothing major. It's just some light snow, and then you see there's another little low that moves in right behind it that brings some more light snow to especially upper parts of New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. But overall, nothing to get too excited about if you're a big fan of winter weather. I'd say the big story up there again are those extreme winds. And then that little cutoff low there, let's see if that brings some rain into SoCal. Looks like it does, and we'll have to see exactly how much and who's getting it. And then it's also good to see that as that low continues to move through, it's going to be bringing some snow to Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, because all these states are actually in a worse drought right now than California is. So it's good to see they're getting some precipitation as well. And then that second system moving through the west, that's the one that's going to be really interesting to watch because, again, it's a ways off in the forecast, so I guarantee it's going to change. The question is how it will change. But right there you see that heavy rain start to build in along the coast, but for the most part, it never pushes all the way into Washington and Oregon. You'll see right there, that's about the bulk of it. We are going to be getting some heavy rain along the Oregon and Northern California coast. We'll look at the totals there. But then watch as that low breaks off, the whole system either moves up into Canada, bringing snow up there, or breaks off and moves down into the Pacific before moving into central and southern California, possibly bringing even some more rain. We'll have to keep our eye on that because that's not till this next weekend. If we want to see the overall precipitation we're going to be picking up in the next couple of days, we can click through there. You can see the bulk of it is down here in the southeast, and especially down in Georgia and South Carolina. That's where we're looking to be in the 2 to 3 inch range, possibly getting up to 4 in some places. But remember, the warnings map did have some scattered flood threats. I could click back just in case you missed it. There are some scattered flood threats through there, but it's nothing, I would say, widespread or extreme. And I'm always hesitant to downplay a warning, but I would say this is actually looking better than those big, heavy rainstorms we had over this last weekend. But keep in mind, there could be some thunderstorms associated with this, so we'll have to keep track of that as this moves through. And then there's that rain pushing into Southern California. Compared to the southeast, it almost looks like nothing, but again, this Southern California needs whatever rain we can get, and the southeast, it's typical for them to always have an inch or 2 inches of rain piling in, so this was a little bit more abnormal if this weird little cutoff low can actually bring some rain to SoCal. And then, like I said, it's also going to bring some precipitation to Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, but that's going to fall as snow, so we'll take a look at that forecast in a second. First, I just want to click through so you can see that heavy rain that's going to be building in along the coasts of Washington, Oregon, and very northern California. There are some places there that look to be in the 2 to 3 inch range, certainly more than we're getting in SoCal. And then as we continue to go through, that's where that second phase brings some rain to the central coast. As you can see, not very much, half an inch at most, but again, we'll take what we can get. When it comes to the snowfall forecast, there's that second system that's going to be going through the northeast. You can see mostly bringing snow to the very northern parts of New York, but even that, it's only 2 to 4 inches, not a major snowstorm by any standards. And then there's that snow that's building into Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado. There's actually some places with that could get up to the 8 to 10 inch range. Most likely widespread is going to be more like 3 to 5 inches though with that. It doesn't look like all that large of a storm. It's a abnormal little cutoff low, and typically those don't bring the extreme snowfall totals that a giant trough would. Now, we can also see that the northern parts of Washington are going to be picking up some snow, and actually that little edge right there in very northwestern Washington, with that system that breaks off and moves into Canada, and then the other half goes down there into California, it does look like the northern Cascades will be picking up at least 6 inches, possibly up to a foot with that system. So it's not dodging you completely. Now, just looking at the northeast, I wanted to show this map because I think this is actually the big story going on in the northeast. Obviously, rain for the southeast and SoCal is a big story. In the northeast, I think the big story is actually the winds. And it's all due to this low pressure system you see sitting up there. Think about it, winds flow into a low, and they flow in a counterclockwise direction. So as that low is sitting off up here, it's already moved off of the US for the most part, but what it's doing is still affecting our weather. And you can see it in the form of these winds right here. You can see right there, that's an example of where we don't have that extreme of winds. That's probably where a high pressure system is, and there's barely any wind streams. Right there, you can see these wind streams going right over Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and that's right where we're going to have some gusts that could be up to 50, even 60 miles per hour at some points. Now, the other thing this is doing, notice if you look at the temperatures in here, is that low, since it's spinning counterclockwise, it's bringing cold air down from Canada. So our high temperatures on Tuesday in the northeast are most likely going to be below freezing and possibly even in the teens, which means our wind chills might even be below zero in some places. I'm actually surprised to not see any wind chill warnings on the map because where you have temperatures in the single digits to the teens, and then mixed with 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, that's where you can get wind chills below 0 degrees. And that's going to continue at least throughout the day today, and then it looks like you'll get a little bit of a warm-up pushing into Wednesday, which is why as that excuse me, which is why as that second system goes through, we actually are going to get some decent snow up here in northern New York, where you see it's below freezing and cold enough for that snow to come in. So just looking at that another way, see overall, not that windy throughout much of the country, except up there in the northeast, where we have these gusts of 35 to 45, 55, even 60 miles per hour at some points throughout the day today. And especially in New Hampshire and Maine, where if you can see very closely on this map, there are some gusts in that dark yellow color, which on the scale looks to be about 60 mile per hour wind gusts right there. And then that one is going to move off. And then the stronger winds are actually going to transition down into the southwest, where that little cutoff low comes in. Looks like for the most part, those stronger winds are dodging SoCal, but Arizona could be getting some 40 mile per hour gusts with that one as well as it moves through. And then what else is going on? It has to do with temperature anomalies. Where are our temperatures far off from the average? And I'd say there's 3 things to look at for this map. One is what's going on down here in the southeast. And it actually makes sense when we think about the low pressure is moving right along the coast down here. It's not inland, it's right down here. And as we were talking about earlier, winds flow into a low pressure. So if the low is right along the coast, you could think of those winds coming down from the more northern states, bringing some colder air down into the southeast. Now where that cold air is brought down and where some warm air is being pushed into the low from the Gulf of Mexico, that's where we get the heavy rain, because that's where moisture and then the cold air, which saturates that moisture and can't hold it in the air, that's where it falls as that heavy rain, especially in Georgia and South Carolina. So below average temperatures for the southeast as that storm moves across the region over the next couple of days. Now the other thing to look at is up here in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, where we have pretty abnormally warm temperatures. That's where we have a temperature anomaly of maybe 20 to 25 degrees above average, while the rest of the country, overall, you could say the eastern half of the country is for the most part above average temperatures, except down there in the southeast where we're pulling down the cold air with that low. But for the most part, it's not looking anywhere as extreme as that Arctic blast we had a couple weeks ago where it was 45 to 55 degrees below average. Now, one other thing to look at on this map is what happens in SoCal as that low goes through. So the extreme winds with that low as it goes through look to be mostly for Arizona, but it looks like SoCal is going to have a pretty large temperature anomaly where we're getting some temperatures maybe even 15 to 25 degrees below average down there in SoCal. And we'll take a close look at that because something interesting is happening with those daytime temperatures. So as we look at the temperatures themselves, what I always do on this map, it's a little hard to see exactly where the numbers are and where they are. So what you can do is if you have this blue color or the purple color, that's where you're below freezing. Where you have the red color, that's where you're up into the 60s and 70s. And then the green and yellow is in the 40s and 50s for the most part. So as we click through the day today, you can see the northeast with that cold air being brought down. That is where we have some below freezing temperatures. And then down in the southeast, we're actually relatively cold. We're in maybe the 40s to 50s at best, and that's because of that cold air being brought down. And then down in the Central Valley here, you can see we are warm throughout the day today, getting into the 60s and 70s. As we continue to click through, overall, it's going to be relatively warm both this week and in the extended forecast. So if we want to look at the extended forecast, this is what's happening on average 6 to 10 days out. This is your climate long-range forecast of what kind of probability you have of warm or cold temperatures. As you can see, that trend of those very well above average temperatures up in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota look to be continuing, as we're still expecting above average temperatures in the 6 to 10 day forecast. Where we have below average temperatures are down here in California and Florida, where California, it's looking very probable that 6 to 10 days out we're going to be in the cold, whereas the middle of the country is going to be warm. Now, in that same 6 to 10 day extended forecast, this is what's going on, or what's expected precipitation-wise. You can see that California and much of the Southwest is actually expecting to get some rain, which is, again, some great news. Almost all these states are in drought right here, so it's good to see that the precipitation forecast is switching down to this region. And then the Midwest looking to get some rain as well, while the entire East Coast and down into the South and Southeast is expecting to be dry in the 6 to 10 day forecast. Now, if we look at the 8 to 14 day forecast, it's even more clearly defined split. The western half of the country is looking to be below average temperatures, and we're especially confident in this for California and Oregon. And then on the eastern half of the country, we're expected to be warmer than average. And right up there in the Midwest, it's looking very probable that those extremely warm temperatures above average temperatures that are up in North Dakota and South Dakota right now are going to be moving into Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. But overall, the entire eastern half of the country looking warm in the extended forecast, which I would say is good news, because it was really the eastern half of the country that felt the strongest effects of that Arctic blast of cold air, where we had below zero temperatures all the way down here in Texas. And up in the Midwest, and then eventually the Northeast and Minnesota, everybody was getting those extremely below average temperatures. So I'm sure anybody living throughout this region who had to deal with that Arctic blast of cold air is certainly looking forward to that forecast right there. And then if we look at the precipitation for 8 to 14 days out, it looks like, again, that precipitation looks to be shifting into the southwest, and especially down there in Southern California, which again is great to see. A big change from what we have been seeing recently is Washington and Oregon are actually expected to be dry, which is much different than the last 3 weeks, where we had storm after storm after storm, bringing 2 to 3 feet of snow at a time to places in the Cascades of Washington. We're also expecting that precipitation to continue in the extended forecast for the Midwest, whereas the Southeast looks like it's going to be switching to a drier pattern. And then in the very long range forecast, the 3-month temperature probability outlook, even though it looks like in the 1 to 2 week span, the West is going to be cold and the East is going to be warm, in the broad scheme of things, in 3-month average, it looks like almost the entire country is going to be seeing some above average temperatures, except for the very northern parts of the Northwest in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. And then down in New Mexico and Texas, that's where we're confident that we're going to have above average temperatures. For the 3-month precipitation probability outlook, even though we're getting some rain in the Southwest in the 1 to 2 week forecast, it looks like we're overall in the next 3 months going to be dry, which again is not great news, because we have certainly not met our usual quotas for seasonal rainfall here in California. There's still a lot of room to make up on what we haven't picked up this year. So what I'm hoping is that in that more precipitation forecast over the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to make up some of those deficits that we found ourselves in right now, so that we're in a better position by the time fire season comes around, and in a better position with regards to the drought. And then in the 3-month forecast, you can see that dry pattern is not going to be continuing. For Washington, expected to get more precipitation up there, and then Midwest, getting more precipitation there, while the Southeast is actually going to be shifting into a drier portion, which, might be welcome to some people in the Southeast, because you had heavy rain all weekend. We're talking about the heavy rain in this forecast, so it might actually be nice to get a little break over the next couple of months. But just to sum everything up that we've talked about so far, overall forecast for the nation, right now, there's not a lot going on. I'd say it's a great forecast right now because there's no extreme weather, major ice storms, or extreme impacts expected. It's almost a breath of fresh air to just be able to look at this warnings map and see how blank it is. The entire western half of the country, barely anything. And then in the eastern half of the country, we do have these scattered flood threats down here. The reason I'm not emphasizing those too much is because I think the situation looked worse over this last weekend. This is more very isolated and scattered portions where we're getting some of those flood threats. And then up in the northeast, that is something to think about. We do have some what you could call extreme winds up there, 45 to even 60 mile per hour wind gusts, especially up there in Maine. But that's only going to be lasting throughout the day today, and then it looks like it's a much calmer forecast in the future. So that's the overall overview of the national forecast. Now I think it's time to actually dive into some regions. So we'll start by diving into the southeast here. And if we want to just take the broad look at that precipitation as it comes in, it's this low that's collecting itself right over Louisiana earlier this morning, which is going to be spreading heavy rain throughout the southeast over the next couple of days, throughout today into Wednesday. And then by Wednesday afternoon, it's moved off into the Atlantic. Where it goes after that, we'll just have to wait and see. But throughout its path, it's bringing heavy rain to Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. If you want to see that another way, this little cutoff low is what we're talking about there. It actually broke off from this trough that's moving through the northeast and bringing the extreme winds to the northeast up there. That's the little cutoff low that's going to be bringing down cold air and then pushing in moisture, allowing all that heavy rainfall to occur throughout the southeast. And as we click through there, you'll notice it's not a major storm, it's not a major system. I think that's also why I'm not too concerned about the flood threat. That right there looks major. We're not expecting any extreme snowfall for the northeast or a major snowstorm because there's not all that much moisture. We are expecting the winds with that, but that's what a big trough and a stronger system looks like. This little guy moving through the southeast is certainly going to bring some heavy rain, but not like the 5 to 7 inches that we were forecasting from Texas into Tennessee last week. So as that goes through, you can see just going to move off and bring heavy rain as it goes. So right here, you can think of this low, it's wide, it's spread out, and then it's almost collecting itself, getting tighter and tighter together. And at that point, at some point, yeah, right there, that's where you see this low actually show up on this map. And you'll notice that even though the other map, it almost looked like it was going through the middle of the southeast, you could see the low itself is down here off the coast. And the reason that is important is actually there's two reasons that's important. You think about the winds flowing into a low. If the low's all the way down here, most of your winds are going to be coming from the north. So that's what's bringing down the cold temperatures into the southeast. Now the other thing it's doing is on the right side of this low, it's counterclockwise, so on the right side, that's where you're pushing in some warm air and moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. That's where you're going to have your rainfall. But since the low is so far down here, it means your heaviest rainfall is going to be in the more southern portions of your states, in Alabama, Georgia, and then right here it actually jumps up. So that's why Georgia and South Carolina are expected to get the most rain with this, because that's where the moisture is going to be funneling in, mixing with that cold air. If you don't know, cold air can't hold as much moisture, so what happens is when that moisture gets pushed in and hits the cold air, the air can't hold it anymore, so it's almost like a sponge. Where that moisture gets into the cold air, that's like squeezing the sponge, because the air itself is not as spread out, like the sponge being spread out before it's squeezed. So as it gets squeezed, that's what happens. All that rain falls into Georgia and South Carolina, where that moisture is mixed with that cold air. If we want to actually see that rain push through, you'll notice it's just like I was saying, it's in the more southern portions of the states. which is actually a little bit different than earlier forecasts were showing. It's more in the more southern portions, and then especially where that low is able to jump up into Georgia. That's where we get the full effects of that moisture and cold air meeting. Looking like we're getting over 2 inches of rain in Georgia, and then South Carolina as well, getting into that 2.5 inch range, while widespread regions of southern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia are getting at least 1.5 inches with that one. So if we want to take a local look to see when that heavy rain is actually going to be building into Georgia and South Carolina, looks like the first bit of it starts at about 1 p.m. today. So you'll be starting to feel this heavy rain in Georgia pretty soon, and then it's going to continue. As we get into 1 a.m. on Wednesday, that's actually where the strongest rain appears to be going in. That's where the low has almost jumped up right there. You can see it. And then at about 7 a.m. on Wednesday, that's where the heavy rain builds into South Carolina before the low moves off and out of the region. So just to go back again, if you missed that, first bit of heavy rain at about 1 p.m. on Tuesday, and then it's going to continue for the region until about 1 p.m. on Wednesday. So it's a quick moving storm, and that's because it's just a little cutoff low working its way through the region, but it is going to bring some heavy rain as it goes through. If we click through there, you can see how that transitions. It starts down here, moves through Georgia, and then finally, Georgia, and then finally up into South Carolina. You can see the states where we're expected to get over 2 inches of rain, and I'm not seeing, maybe there's a chance that this border right here between Georgia and South Carolina could get up to the 3-inch range, but overall it's looking like a pretty widespread area that's getting 2.5 right there. So like I was also saying, this low is going to be affecting the temperatures as well. It's not just bringing in rain, it's affecting the temperatures as well. And you can see how that looks on this map perfectly right here. So at this point, the low is right about there, right off of Louisiana. And you think about the winds flowing into that low, bringing that cold air down, which is creating 10 to 15 degree below average temperatures, especially where we're closest to that low in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Now, right about here is where I want to pause and really look at this graphic, because it perfectly explains a pretty important thing to understand about weather. And you can see it again right there, but I'd say this is actually the best spot. So there's the low right above Florida. And the reason I can tell it's right there has to do with the color. So if the low's right there, you think the counterclockwise circulation around this low. So on the right side, you're pushing up this warm air from the Gulf of Mexico, and you can actually see that warm air. Right there would be the warm front, where that warm air is starting to push into Georgia, and then it continues into Florida in the next frame. So that's where you're bringing up warm air and moisture. But on the left side, you think we're still going counterclockwise, so on the left side, that's where you're bringing down cold air. So as we get into Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, that's where Louisiana and Mississippi are going to be 10 to 15 degrees below average because of this overall circulation of this low. It's just a perfect example of how you have a warm front right there on the eastern side of a low, and then this cold front down there where that cold air is being pulled down from the more northern states. I purposely spent a good amount of time on that because that's just a perfect graphic that goes along with anything you'd learn in a meteorology 101 class. How you have that low, warm front, cold front, and the effects that has on temperature and moisture. Now, if you want to see that even better, there you can actually see the winds and how this works. So you have on the left side, these winds coming down. You think they're pulling down that cold air. Look at this. This is Tuesday at 4 p.m., which should be our daytime highs, and Louisiana, Mississippi are in the 40s. Now, where we have that warm air pushing up from the Gulf of Mexico, which you can see right there, that's where it's 7 p.m. on Tuesday, and Florida is still in the 70s. And that's just going to continue until that low moves out of the southeast. So I think that's a good place to stop when it comes to the southeast. I think now we can move up in this map to see what's going on in the northeast. And it all has to do right now with this low pressure system. Hopefully you can see it on your screen up here. It's already moved through, and it didn't bring all that. It wasn't a major snowstorm by any standards for the northeast because the low itself remained very far to the north. Now what we are getting though is that cold air, the exact same thing we were just talking about for the southeast, the cold air being pulled down into the northeast because of that low, because we're on the left side of it now. So that's bringing some cold air in. Tuesday at 1 p.m. and 4 p.m., where it should be your daytime highs, you can see the entire northeast is looking like it's below freezing. You can quickly tell that because the blue color is below freezing while the green color is above freezing. And your daytime highs today look to be in the possibly even single digits to the teens throughout much of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Now the other thing this is doing, it's not just bringing the cold air down, it's bringing some extreme wind gusts as well. Right there you can actually see these wind streams flowing into this low. Those are going to be about 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts, and we'll look at exactly who's going to be getting the strongest winds and when in a second. But first I want to just mention that overall, and hopefully you can see this, I don't think I actually formatted this correctly. There we go. That's probably in the general vicinity of where you could see this on the live stream. I'm cropping my screen so that it's just one part of it. You can see that overall limited impacts are expected. So it's cold. We are going to be getting a little bit of snow up here in northern New York, the one spot where we have minor impacts expected, but it's by no means an extreme winter storm or a major snowstorm or anything of that nature. You can see, I love to show this, it's the Winter Storm Severity Index because it puts into perspective what kind of weather you have right now. And right now, Northeast has limited impacts expected, which means it's probably not going to affect your life by any means whatsoever. So if we want to see it on the precipitation map, I think the big story for the Northeast has to do with the winds and the cold. Those two can combine to create a wind chill. But it is worth noting that there is going to be some light snow as well, and especially up in northern New York. Very light snow though, not all that much in this region, especially with some of the storms that we've had throughout this year. If you want to see this another way, there's that large trough moving through. Now, you'll notice for the most part, it's already gone. It's moved off into the Atlantic or up into Canada, but what's left behind is important to look at right here. So typically on the left side of a trough is not where you're going to be getting all your heavy precipitation. That's typically on the right side of a trough. So it makes sense that we're not getting very much snow with this. Now what we are getting are those extreme winds. And you can see that on this map because that's where these isobars, lines of constant pressure, are the closest together. So down here in New Mexico, where the isobars almost cover the entire state, there's a separation so big. Right there, there's a very small gradient. You can think of the atmosphere of almost being flat right there. So the winds there's probably zero wind in New Mexico right now because of how flat that gradient is. Where you have these lines close together, that's where your pressure gradient gets very steep and the winds flow down that pressure gradient. So the closer those lines are together, the faster your winds are going to be. And you can see that in the Northeast, those lines are very close together, which is why we have those extreme winds. So just looking at the precipitation, there's that light snow coming in either tonight or into early Wednesday morning. Northern parts of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire. New Hampshire a little bit. I'm hesitant to say if you'll actually be getting all that much snow. Looks like mostly northern parts of New York and Vermont getting that very light snow, and then it's gone. So it's not all that much, but that is where we have the limited impacts expected. As that snow piles in over the next couple of days, you can see it's about 2 to 4 inches in that little bullseye right up there in northern New York. Looks like New Hampshire could get an inch, and then Vermont, you're going to be around an inch to an inch and a half of snow. So again, by no means is this a major extreme snowstorm. Now, where you could use the word extreme is when it comes to the winds. That's what was showing up this morning. Let's go to right about now. A lot of those extreme winds are starting to transition out of New York and work their way into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, where you can see some of those gusts are 50 to 65 miles an hour. So that is certainly some extreme weather going on there. So that's why I think that's the big story when it comes to the weather for the Northeast throughout the day today. You can see even as we get into early Wednesday, those extreme wind gusts are sticking around. Early Wednesday morning, there are still going to be some spots in Maine that are gusting 35 to 40 miles per hour. But then as we get later throughout the day, we're going to get a lot more mild throughout the Northeast as we work into Wednesday afternoon and into Thursday. Looks like majority of the Northeast just getting back to some more normal wind gusts, except up there in Maine, where there are isolated regions where those winds will continue at 40 to 45 miles an hour. So we'll have to keep our eye on that. Overall, that's the key spot to look at between New Hampshire and Maine when it comes to those winds. So first, we'll just take a local look at that snowfall as it comes in. Looks to be about 1 a.m. on Wednesday is when that snowfall is going to be finding its way into northern parts of New York and Vermont. And then some light snow might be scattered throughout the day Wednesday in isolated regions, especially in the northern parts of the state where the temperatures are a bit warmer. But again, it's not a major storm pushing through bringing a foot of snowfall. If we want to look at the totals, by 1 p.m. on Thursday, it looks like there's that bullseye where we should be getting 3 to 4 inches of snow, but then widespread we're getting about 1 to 2 inches, and then Vermont about 1 to 1.5 inches of snow right there. Now, we'll move up into the upper New England to take a look at those wind gusts. Let's go to right about now to see what it looks like. Right there, if there's anybody living in New Hampshire or Maine, maybe take a video of how strong the winds are and send it to my messages on Hold Handy Weather on Facebook, because I'd love to see how strong these winds actually are, because that's significant right there. That's 60 to 65 mile per hour wind gusts, and that's what's going on right now. And then as we click into tonight, looks like those winds are not going to be easing up anytime soon because that pressure gradient is so strong. And then overall on Wednesday, it appears to be calming down. But again, there is that second little part. That's where this second little system comes in and brings some snow to New York. That's where we're going to see some of those stronger wind gusts reoccur and pop back up throughout New Hampshire and Maine, getting back into that 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gust range, just in that strip right there. So again, I think that's the key story for the Northeast. Let's just click back. I'd say about between right now and 7 p.m. tonight, I think is the big story for the Northeast, because that's when we have the most extreme winds of up to 60 mile per hour wind gusts throughout upper parts of New England. If we want to see that again, that's just that trough moving through, bringing those extreme winds, and then behind that we'll have some light snow building in. Now, what's going on in the western half of the country is, I would say, some good news, because I'll remind you, California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, a lot of these southwestern states are in some cases, extreme drought right now, but there is some good news on the horizon. You can see it on the horizon of the screen as this little cutoff low broke off from the system that was going to move through Washington and Oregon. Instead, the system broke off and moved down into the Pacific. Now, it moved down just perfectly south for a little while there, and then as we get into tomorrow, that system is going to start finding its way into Southern California. And typically, this is something that the models aren't the best at predicting, where there's a cutoff low and exactly what's going to happen with it. But given that this is expected to happen tomorrow, I would say there's a pretty good chance we're getting some rain in Southern California. So that's why I'm a bit excited for this forecast, as you see that low move through right there. And then we're also going to be talking about what's going on the back end of this system. It almost looks like the exact same thing is going to be happening again. So this is how that first trough started out looking. It looked like a big trough moving into Washington and Oregon. much like a lot of the ones we had over the last 2 weeks where we'd get 3 feet of snow up here in Washington. But again, the same thing seems to be happening. It breaks off in two. Part of it goes up into Canada, and then part of it becomes a cutoff low that moves into central and southern California. So it's almost the exact same pattern repeating itself both right now and then as we get into this weekend. Now, as we get into this weekend, that's where that one's a little bit more questionable, because that's where the forecast models could be a little shaky on if this will actually happen. But the fact that we have 2 possible systems bringing rain to Southern California, I would say is some great news. If we want to see that precipitation as it goes in, there's that cutoff low off in the Pacific. Think of it just gathering a bunch of moisture at this point and then moving through Southern California. Now, that might have been a little disappointing seeing the rain as it came in. It certainly is not heavy or extreme rainfall by any standards, but it's something. And then on the back end, there's that next system that's just going to hang off the coast of Washington and Oregon there. We are going to be diving into Washington and Oregon and the very northern parts of California because there are some rainfall totals that appear to be significant right along the coast right there. But then what we're just looking at, it almost breaks in two. That's a perfect graphic to show what happens. It almost splits itself apart. Half of it goes up and brings snow into Canada, and then half of it moves off into the Pacific, becomes its own little cutoff low, and then brings some rain to Central Coast and possibly even into Southern California. So just in case you missed that was a pretty cool graphic, how it comes in as one system, splits in two, and then moves into California, hopefully bringing some rain to Southern California. And this is why I keep saying hopefully. And I know sometimes as a weather forecaster, you're supposed to be hesitant about hoping for a storm, but this is why I am crossing my fingers hoping for the storm. Much of this region is in extreme to severe to even major drought, especially down here as we get into southern, actually, I was going to say especially, but basically the entire Southwest could really use some precipitation right now. And especially down here in Southern California, where although it doesn't look like that's the most extreme part of the drought, that's where we haven't had a lot of rain in quite some time. So that's where the fuels can start to dry out, which starts to scare me for fire season. And then also some good news here. I haven't really mentioned it throughout this forecast so far, but all these states, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, actually look to be in an even worse drought than California is. But if we look at where that precipitation is going to be moving in, those states are actually going to be getting even more than California. And we'll look at that in a second. First, let's just look at the precipitation as it actually comes in. There's that low off the coast right there. Then it looks to be coming in Wednesday afternoon. We might start to see some snow or some rain building into SoCal. There actually is some snow building into the Sierras, but very light, so not spending too much time on that. But stretching out for most of Southern California, getting at least some light rain with that one. And then that's what I was saying. It's going to continue and actually bring some heavier rain and heavier snow as we work into Nevada, Utah, Arizona, which is good to see because, as we were just looking at, those states are in extreme drought as well. So let's just see if we can see that push through right there. That's that first system. It looks like we're getting an inch of rain down in San Diego, so that's actually some pretty great news down there. And then that is actually going to be falling as snowfall. So when it comes to your guys' drought, that'll probably more help once that snowfall all melts. But you can see where, again, it's not a whole bunch of rain. For the most part, majority of SoCal is just getting 1/10 of an inch to maybe 1/4 of an inch. But we do have that little bullseye in San Diego where an inch of rain is possible. So let's just zoom in there, and then we'll take a closer look at that second system. I'll do that at the end because that's farther off in the forecast. Not a guarantee it's going to happen, so we'll just focus on what's most important right now. Again, 10 a.m. Wednesday is when that rain starts to push into Southern California, and then you can see right down there in San Diego where we saw those greatest accumulations. That's really the only place where there appears to be rain over 0.2 inches per hour. There's widespread rain throughout the Southern California coast. I don't know why I can't say that today. But it's not exactly heavy. And especially if you're watching the forecast for the southeast earlier in this video, you might look at this and almost laugh because it looks like absolutely nothing compared to what we were looking at in the southeast. But it's a lot for Southern California. So one thing to notice there is San Diego is the first to get the rain, and they're also the last to get the rain, which is why the totals down there are the best. Let's actually, while we're on the precipitation map, let's look at the exact timing. 10 a.m. Wednesday it comes in, looks to be gone by about 4 a.m. on Thursday. So it's a quick storm, which is typical for those little cutoff lows. They're usually pretty quick movers because they get wrapped up in the overall pattern above. If we look at the accumulated moisture as that comes in, looks like, again, San Diego, where we're able to pick up the rain for the longest period of time, which is important when you're not getting heavy rain. What you count on to get higher totals is if you can at least pick up light rain for a longer period of time. That is exactly what we just saw down in San Diego, where there are some spots that I was saying an inch of rain. We do have some purple color right there, which is on the inch time bar or time scale, or no, not a time scale, color bar. That's what I'm trying to say. Down here, that would be an inch of rain, but then widespread, we're looking at maybe a tenth to 0.2 inches of rain as we go into Los Angeles down all the way into Oceanside. So again, I would say that's overall encouraging. An inch of rain for SoCal is certainly good news. Now there's one other thing that I'll point out when it comes to that area in SoCal is what's going on with the temperatures. And it's actually pretty interesting. As that low moves through, you can see right before much of Southern California is relatively mild, even some above average temperatures, even some 15 degree above average temperatures. As that low moves through, it's going to bring well below average temperatures. That's where we're getting into this purple color there. That's where you're 20 to 30 degrees below average throughout this area of Southern California as that low moves through. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You can see a very clear contrast where Northern California is 15 to 25 degrees above average because the low isn't moving through up here. It is moving through right down on the San Diego border where you can see it's the exact contrast. We have 15 to 20 degree above average temperatures in NorCal, 15 to 25 degree below average temperatures in SoCal as that system moves through, and then it'll be a return to more mild conditions after that. If we want to look at the temperatures themselves, let's actually go back to the precipitation, figure out exactly when that comes through. 10 a.m. Wednesday to about 10 p.m. on Wednesday. So if we go to the temperature map, let's go to 10 a.m. on Wednesday. So at this point, I'd say it's actually pretty warm. It's 67 in Los Angeles, 62 in San Diego at 10 in the morning. Then at 4 p.m., which is typically when you see your daytime highs, that was this map. Oh, okay. I was wondering why it looked so wrong, and it's because it is wrong. We were looking at Tuesday right there. My bad. It's a good thing that a similar trend wasn't showing up, or I would have just been saying the wrong thing. Okay, 10 a.m. on Wednesday, as this system is just about to move into SoCal, you can see Los Angeles 56 degrees, San Diego 57 degrees. So it's actually kind of nice I just made that mistake because you can already see some of the cooling effects coming in, but that is still pretty typical for 10 a.m. in the morning, in the 60s you could say. And then watch what happens as we go to 4 p.m. on Wednesday as this system moves through. So 4 p.m. is typically when you see your daytime highs, so this should be going up into the mid-70s. Instead, it's actually going down, and especially where we saw those greatest temperature anomalies. So 10 a.m., you're looking at mid to high 50s, and then 4 p.m. when you should have your daytime highs, you're in the low 50s, and even into possibly the 40s and below freezing in some places. Where you have blue color, that's where you're below freezing. So right along that strip right there, we're going to be rather cold. So I might have just spent too long saying that, but I just thought it was interesting that our daytime highs are actually occurring in the morning as that system moves through. So if we want to see this, again, this shows vorticity. Won't get into that exactly what that is. You could just think of it as storm energy. So you can see all that storm energy off of Southern California right now. Now, as we get into Wednesday morning, that's where it starts to make landfall, and you can see the majority of that is pushing right into SoCal and very Southern California. Again, Northern California almost completely out of it, which goes along with that temperature anomaly map we were just looking at. So that one goes through. And then let's just see what our next... Okay, so this is a good spot to transition to this second system that's moving through. Right there, you can see it as it goes onto the coast of Washington and Oregon. That's this second system that looks to be moving into the northwest early Friday morning. Now at this point, we are getting some heavy rain throughout Washington and Oregon, which we'll look at. But what we're really interested in is what happens as this splits in two. So right about there. So if you back it up, there it's coming in as one. This looks like just your average trough pushing through that brought us all that heavy snowfall to Washington and Oregon over the last couple weeks. Right here, it splits in two. Half of it goes up into Canada, half of it breaks off just like that first system did into a cutoff low into the Pacific. Now this one right there, that is a lot of vorticities, a lot of storm energy before moving into the central coast and then Southern California as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that second system. It's a ways off in the forecast, so a lot can happen, but it's interesting to see what the models are at least showing at this point. So it looks like right about Thursday night into Friday morning, that's where the system first starts showing up, and we do get that heavy rain and even some heavy snow up here and where it's cold enough in Washington, right along the coast, but especially down in Oregon and very northern California. But you'll notice it doesn't move through like all those systems we had been looking at in the past couple of weeks where then it moves through, brings snow to Idaho and Montana. It splits in two. That's a good image on the precipitation map where part of that is moving up into Canada and part of it you can see moving down into the Pacific. If we want to look at the total accumulated precipitation right there, it's rather significant along the coast. You can see parts of Washington, Oregon, and then right along that Northern California-Oregon border, there's some places that are picking up over 2 to maybe even 3 inches of rain with that. But it's very interesting to see that it doesn't push in to further into the northwest like all those old systems. Instead, it breaks off and moves into California. If you want to see that another way, there's that system right now, and then there's this new trough building in. Right about there is where we're getting the heavy rain throughout Washington and Oregon, and then it breaks in two. Part of it goes up into Canada, part of it moves off and hits central California. So let's actually look at that second system now. So that's the first one, and then we're dry throughout Thursday, and then this next system, you can see it starts off bringing that heavy rain to Northern California, and then that's where it's broken off and then starts bringing that rain to the central coast down in San Luis Obispo, and then some more rain down into Southern California. Now again, it doesn't exactly look like heavy rain right there along with the vorticity map. That is where we had a little bit more storm energy showing up, so a little bit heavier rain at this point from stretching all the way from Monterey down past San Luis Obispo and Point Conception, and then some very light rain pushing into Southern California. So in total, if we combine these two systems, there's the first one, bringing at most an inch of rain down to San Diego. For the most part, don't get too excited about it. It's just 0.1 to 0.2 inches widespread. And then that second one, as it starts to bring that heavy rain up to Northern California first, 1 to 2 inches up there, and then swings down and brings some rain into the central coast. So in total, if all this comes to fruition, we'll have to keep our eye on the forecast to see if it does. But down from Monterey down to Southern California, along the coast, it looks like we'll at least be getting some rain. And again, the bullseye still looks to be in San Diego, where over the next week, we could be getting an inch of rain down there. So certainly crossing my fingers, hoping that happens. We'll stay updated with that one to see what actually does end up happening. So that was decent timing again, wrapped up in about an hour. I think a good thing to do just to fully wrap it up is to give a quick summary of everything that we've been talking about throughout this video. So we'll start just by looking at the southeast here. We talked about that low pressure system that is currently bringing down cold air below average temperatures and then pushing in moisture, bringing heavy rain to southern Mississippi, Alabama, and then especially into Georgia and South Carolina, where we're expected to pick up over 2 inches of rain. And then if we back up the map there and keep our eye on the northeast, that's where we're expected to have some light snow building into New York and Vermont, where we could be getting 2 to 4 inches of snow in the very center bullseye of where that snow is pushing into New York. For the most part, that's not the big part of the story. The big part of the story are those close isobars that you see right there, bringing extreme wind gusts to Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine throughout the day today. Some gusts getting up to 50, 60 mile per hour. So that is the big story up there in the northeast. Then the big story on the west is that low pressure system that's forming right now. In tomorrow's forecast, I'll pull up a satellite image to see if we can actually see this storm as it moves through. But it's forming right now and then should be bringing some rain up to an inch down to San Diego, widespread, just about 0.1 to 0.2 inches throughout the Southern California coast. And then behind that, in the extended forecast that we'll have to keep our eye on is what happens with this second system, where it starts as heavy rain for Washington, Oregon, very northern parts of California, bringing in 2 to 3 inches of rain there, and then splits in two right there, brings snow to Canada, and then forms another little cutoff low that appears to mostly be hitting the central coast. So we'll have to keep our eye on that because that's all the way into this weekend, and I guarantee that forecast will change. So if you want to stay updated with that, as well as all other top weather stories going on around the country, you can subscribe to Hold Hanley Weather, where I do these forecasts every single day. So just to overall sum up, I'll go back to the warnings map. This is a summary overall, and I'd say it's great news. We do have that high wind warning up here in the northeast, which is your most extreme weather for the day. But overall, looking at this warnings map right here, I'd say it's great news. Not a whole lot of extreme weather going on. It's relatively moderate. The extreme weather seems to be giving us a break. On the winter storm severity map, the most we're expected is some minor impacts with that snow in New York, just limited impacts expected everywhere else. So weather-wise, I'd say that's some great news, and I hope you enjoy some of this good weather that we'll be having over the next couple days, and thank you for watching.